that you can be your own greatest teacher if you just observe what's going on and try not to make a mistake twice, because we're all going to make mistakes. Every time you scrub on a case, or when you do a case, when you get through, just briefly go over in your mind, do a critique, and say, well, if I did this operation again tomorrow, would I do it the same way that I did today? Is there something I would change?
And my first interest in medicine was I found out I wasn't an athlete when I was at Macaulay, so I wound up managing the football and baseball teams, which meant I was the one who took the injured player to see Dr. Bibb. Dr. Bibb's office was downtown, and David Macaulay was his nephew, and so that's where I got started on athletic injuries.
As I was growing up, my dad had a small farm, and one of my biggest pleasures was taking care of our sick animals, especially if one got wounded and I got to scrub out the wound and keep it clean and take care of it. I just loved it. While we grossed a lot of people out, I just thought it was great fun.
My history in healthcare and at Erlanger Hospital started really as a junior at Red Bank High School. I stopped by Macaulay Avenue at Campbell Clinic one afternoon, and Dr. Campbell bumped into me and says, "Hey kid, can you come in after school and wash dishes in the laboratory?" I said, "Sure can." And pretty soon I was washing dishes in the laboratory. And the second or third day, I quit washing dishes and started sticking needles in people. And the fourth or fifth day, I was a regular lab tech. By the time I graduated from high school, I was a full-blown med-tech and went to the opening of Tri-County Hospital on my 21st birthday, November 8, 1953. Herman Talmadge was the speaker, and I was roaming around the campus listening to him. And Erlanger Pathology, who was running the laboratory out there because they did not have a pathologist, asked me if I'd work for them and be the lab tech at night on emergency call. I said, "Sure will." So for 10 years, I answered to Erlanger Pathology and was the emergency tech at Tri-County Hospital.
I think any physician has a responsibility to good patient care, to teaching, and also to the community. And I've been involved in that from early on. I've always gone to church. I think church is an important part of being an oncologist, but always been interested in music and was on the board of the Chattanooga Symphony and became a chairman of the board of the Chattanooga Symphony at one point. In later years, as I got tired of night call, being awakened in the middle of the night, I drifted more toward teaching and was asked to be chairman of the Department of Medicine here. Gosh, I guess that's been about 20 years ago.
I had been a teacher on the orthopedic faculty at Ole Miss, and that was very rewarding. And then I got the opportunity to do the same thing here. And there was also another drawing point, not only home and family, but also a hospital that did great things, and a residency program, which the residency program was one of my most favorite aspects of my whole career.
And my father was here and saw the war coming because he had enlisted and was doing I guess volunteer work out when Fort Oglethorpe was still, the Patton's Armored Division was out there, and so he was here, and then he only stayed in practice 6 months, and then he went active duty, and they sent him to Fort Bragg, and the chief medical officer there didn't know what to do with him because he didn't have any neurosurgeons. As Martha had said, he was the first neurosurgeon in the United States Army because he'd just taken the boards. He took the first boards, like she took the first boards in intensive care, pediatric intensive care. He took the first boards in neurosurgery and was board certified in 1940. Yeah, there weren't very many residencies. There were like 9 or 10 true neurosurgery residencies in the 30s. So they started coming out, obviously, just in time for the war. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, he was at Fort Bragg, and the chief medical officer had him do psychiatry or something. He thought neurology and psychiatry, but there was when they had a head injury, they would put him on a night train to Walter Reed. And so this one night, that brought an emergency case in. A young guy had gone to Fayetteville and gotten drunk, and he was in an automobile accident, came in unconscious, and Daddy examined him, and they said, well, we got to ship him out to Walter Reed. And my father told the chief medical officer, well, you can do that, but he's not going to make it. He's going to be dead when he gets there. And so the guy got all, he said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I think he's got a subdural hematoma, and I'll put a burr hole in his skull because he was a neurologist, no imaging, of course. He was trained as a neurologist, so he could locate tumors. Mm-hmm. And by the way, when he would help Phil in residence in clinic here after he retired, he didn't want to see the image. He didn't want to see the MR scan. He didn't want to see the CT. He said, I'll tell you where to put the burr hole to operate on. Yeah, he loved to do that. And then he'd say, now show me the CT, and he'd be right most of the time.
Wow.
Anyway, so that was where the expertise was. So they took him to the operating theater at Fort Bragg, and Daddy put the burr hole in him, evacuated the clot, and no anesthesia, because he was like 19 years old, 20 years old. He was there training to be a paratrooper, 82nd Airborne. And so during this time period while they're getting ready for surgery, they got a telephone call from Washington. It turns out that the kid's father was a congressman from Wisconsin. And they all went crazy because, oh my God, we got to do something. We got to ship him. No, Daddy said, you ship him, he's going to be dead. I'm sorry, And so they finally angst about it, and then they let him do the surgery. Well, the kid wakes up in the middle of surgery without anesthesia. As soon as he decompressed the brain and evacuated the clot, the kid starts screaming and yelling. And and Daddy said, well, that worked out pretty well, kind of sarcastically with the chief medical officer. And they started walking out of the operating theater, and the guy said, we're going to have a neurosurgery center right here. He said, I'm going to get all the money, and you're staying here, and we're going to fix it. We're going to be the first neurosurgery. And so they did.
My third year of medical school, fortunately, they allowed us to leave. Back then it was only 3 years. So I left Memphis to come up here in January of 78, I think. My first rotation was 3 months of general surgery here. During that 3 months is when I decided this was it for me. No doubt about what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a surgeon. And I credit Dr. Burns in particular for his influence on my decision to do that. That plus the training program that he had here, through his leadership and his example, he provided an atmosphere that I just love. Love the faculty, love the residents who were here. Important faculty besides him were Dr. Joel Clements and Dr. Bill Russell. And I was saying earlier there was Jack Messina who was here for a little while, another fine physician who I thought a lot of as a student. I met some other ones during the other rotations that I did, but those were the greatest influence I had, was the surgeons who were here. But this is where I wanted to be. This was my dream, is to be here. I wanted to live here, and I wanted to be part of this program. So I started that in 79. I started odd. I started in January. Most students start, in July. But because medical school in Memphis was 3 years, there were 2 classes a year, one in July, one in January. So some finished in June and some finished in December, which I did. So I started sort of in mid-year. I did have a very unique experience in that I'd been here a little over 2 years, and Dr. Burns called me into his office, and he said, son, you start in January, so you cannot finish in December. So you can either do an extra 6 months of training, or you can have 6 months off. So I went home, talked to my wife, I said, what do you think? She said, 6 months off.
So I liked Chattanooga, and I said, that might be a good place. So I came here and interviewed at that point. And Dr. Yutaka Kato was the program director at that point. He was an interesting guy. He was a Fulbright scholar. He was no mental slouch at all. He was, and he interviewed here Richard Alvarez and I. And Richard Alvarez went on to do foot and ankle fellowship, and then became the chairman of surgery here, and did a great job at that. But Richard and I, were the two came here and interviewed. I was impressed because, you know, you got treated like a doctor here. You know, there wasn't any of this carry your own stuff to the lab, do your own lab work because somebody's going to lose it or throw it down the elevator shaft. The people here were good. The support people here were good. You know, when you were treated more like a physician here.